All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to the AUSA Coffee Series featuring the 41st Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, General Randy George. I am Alex Brody. I'm the Director of Meetings at AUSA, and it is a pleasure to welcome all of you here today. I must say, whenever we have the Chief, we always have a distinguished list of guests and VIPs here headlining our event. It really is a who's who in the room. It's almost like being at the Grammys. I thought I would turn the corner and see Taylor Swift and Jason Kelce over in the corner. Speaking of Taylor Swift, who here is a Swiftie besides SMA Daily? Go ahead, raise your hand. We're not recording yet, so it's okay. All right, before I get kicked out of here, I do want to thank our four-star sponsors, Leonardo DRS and General Dynamics, as well as our two-star sponsors, Leidos and Northrop Grumman, for their support of our coffee series. Let's give them a big round of applause. Honestly, we can't do these events without our great industry partners. So if you're interested in learning about being a sponsor at one of our events, please connect with Gay Hudson or Emily Call. They're both here at the registration desk, and they would love to speak with you about supporting these events. I also want to thank the general officers and command sergeants major who are here today. Of course, it's always great to see you. And I'd also like to acknowledge the congressional staff that are here this morning. Your efforts on behalf of the Army, soldiers, and families is greatly appreciated. Now, speaking of VIPs, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Association of the United States Army. Please help me welcome General Robert Brown.
Thanks, Alex. All right, well, good morning, everybody. It's a great crowd, and it should be a fantastic session. Remember, you got to have your tough questions ready. The Chief told me he wants tough questions, no easy ones, no softballs. But thanks for joining us. And as was mentioned, just kind of really, I almost felt we don't need this, but I think it's important. The bio, it's impressive. Randy George, when I go through this, you'll see what a tremendous choice for Chief of Staff of the Army to be guiding us during this challenging time. So we're honored to have him with us. General George is a native of Alden, Iowa, and commissioned from the U.S. Military Academy in 1988. A young guy, and as an infantry officer, he's commanded at all levels, from company to corps, and has deployed in support of Operations Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and Desert Shield, Desert Storm. He also served in a multitude of key staff assignments in both joint and Army organizations, and served as a fellow on the Council of Foreign Relations. He assumed duties as the 38th Vice Chief of Staff in August of 22, and then became Chief of Staff of the Army on September 23rd, 2023. We're very fortunate to have the right leader at the right time leading our Army during this critical transformation the Army's going through in these key challenging times that just seem to get more and more challenging. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce General Randy George. Please join me in welcoming him. Well, thanks for being here, Chief, and really appreciate it. And you know how busy your schedule is. But you had the chance recently, we were talking about, you've been out and about, just came back from CENTCOM, you've been over in Europe several times, multiple trips to see troops around the world, Pacific as well. So as from those trips, I'm sure you've got a great perspective of what's going on, and just like to get your thoughts on the strategic environment today, especially in lieu of obviously what's happening in Ukraine and Gaza. So start off with that.
First, great to be here, and great to be called a young fella. I don't get that much, so I appreciate that. It's great traveling. Obviously, you got to. It's one thing to put out direction and guidance. It's kind of here in the building, but it's another thing to go out and see what our troops are doing. Yeah. And I think that I get more out of those trips, I'm sure, than they get from seeing me when I'm out there on the ground. So I think just to go back to the environment, we talk a lot about it, and I was doing this last summer, first coming in, where everybody talks about how complex the world is. And I can't imagine that I was thinking back to everybody who's come in to be the chief, and you will always say, hey, it's really complex times. Yeah. And you can just think back of all the complex times. I think the difference today is just with the tech disruption that we've had, is the volatility is completely different. Yeah. and just how fast things are spinning on the tech side.
Yeah.
I think is completely different than what we have seen, and there's a lot of implications with that on how we do business and how we change. And so really getting out there and talking to our troops and seeing how they're dealing with that. Obviously, what we really want to do is focus on our warfighting mission and building cohesive teams. And I've talked about that to every group I talk about. And then what is it that we can do really at echelon to unencumber them so they can do that. And I can give you examples of the things that we're talking about, whether it's reducing the equipment that they have, reducing property, reducing property books, services. But we want to see out of the lessons that we're learning around the world, what are we doing to change our training? What are we doing to change our professional military education? And then what are we doing differently to acquire equipment that we know we're going to need on the modern battlefield?
Yeah, and those challenging during any times, but particularly as you're talking about the speed of change and so forth.
Right.
Well, your priorities are behind us here, and I know kind of curious of which ones have you been focusing on, and then where are you seeing momentum in those areas as you go around?
So we have we've lined up each one of the focus areas to a major command. The first one is warfighting, and I always tell everybody that that has to be the focus. I want the leaders at every level to understand that that's what our focus is, building lethality and cohesive teams. So I talk to commanders, if you are not relaying that message all the way down with, what your priorities are and what you're doing, and they're not hearing that message, then we need to kind of recalibrate what we're doing. But I think we have to do all of them that's up there. We have units that are going to focus on getting more lethal and building cohesive teams. We are going to have to deliver ready combat formations, and we can talk about what we need to do to increase production, build our magazine depth. We talk about what we need to do to improve quality of life at our installations is about delivering ready combat formations. We have to do that. And then we are spending a lot of time on continuous transformation. I can talk a little bit about that. And one of the things that we're doing as far as transforming in contact, which is something here we're getting ready to kind of roll out. I got a couple of meetings on that this week with FORSCOM and with AFC. And then really the profession for us is I think foundational to everything we do. And this is about trust inside of our formation, and it's about trust that we get from the American people. One of the things that's not on here that's not up above that I talk about probably every day, and I know we got another meeting today, is recruiting.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing you don't put on there. Maybe you could put that as a backdrop to everything that we do. But I think what makes the all-volunteer force is what's made us great. Our soldiers and really our NCOs. And so I think that we have to be focused on that.
Progress in that. Any update?
We have made some progress. So we were better this last year, 55,000, and so it was a 20% increase. The secretary and I just made some announcements last September about how we're picking recruiters. Whoever is in right now, Johnny Davis, it's going to be a longer term for the commander and the sergeant major to be recruiting so that we can see some of this through. I think we can do better at getting off the shelf tech to them. We need to do better about analyzing what's working and what's not. We're going to stand up 420 tangos. We're going through a process right now, which is our warrant officers that are focused on IT and marketing. So we are doing better this year than we were last year. It's probably an area that I won't feel positive until we, see it at the end. But I'm optimistic right now that we're doing, and we're certainly pouring our hearts into that.
Yeah, a lot of great initiatives. I'm glad that's paying off. At your AUSA speech, Eisenhower luncheon, where you unveiled the priorities, you talked about the network being the number one priority. And how has the Army gotten about tackling that, and where are we with
Yeah.
the network? Such a
So,
key area.
well, I think really commanders at echelon believe that the network has to be a number one priority. You cannot communicate on the battlefield. You cannot command and control. Everything that we do across all warfighting function depends on our network. So I was out at the National, I've visited the last couple weekends, the National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center. And like I said at AUSA last October, what you don't want everybody to say, hey, that's the division talk that's on the battlefield. I mean, you want to be on the battlefield. You want to be, you don't want to be seen. You want to, blend into the environment. And I think everybody in here can visualize the big, I know when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, you could move around and you'd see all the big satellite dishes, all the vehicles, all of those things, and that will get us killed on today's battlefield. Yeah. And so we were just out, we put a 1st Armored Division was actually out at National Training Center. They were on the ground and went out to, it was Jim Eisenhower that was out there, and he had a division TAC. It had 5 vehicles, had an RF shield that was over it, had small UAS that was there that were, to provide detection and a little bit of protection. And that was a C2 node that could move in 5 minutes. And that's where we need to be. And it was very low signature. The core CP was out there with Sean Bernabe. I went up and they are hidden. They were in a warehouse. You didn't see, there was not a vehicle outside. There was nothing. I mean, when you walked in and they were inside of that, and they were aware of when satellite passes were going to happen. So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about. That's the way that we can see. And I talk a lot about, there's one thing to have a lesson observed. It's different to actually learn the lesson. And to learn the lesson, again, we have to change how we operate.
Clearly, what's happening in Ukraine is driving it home for those folks. That's a huge improvement.
It is.
And electronic warfare coming into play out there as well.
Absolutely. I've been down to Fort Eisenhower, and we're looking. And again, one of the things that we're going to do, and I mentioned it earlier, is we are selecting some brigades that we are actually going to do what we're calling transforming in contact. It's a really busy Army. We know we're going to have to make some adjustments, and so what we're doing, Europe is a great place to learn. Yeah. When you're actually deploying a unit over there. Out in the Indo-Pacific, and what Charlie Flynn is doing out there is a great place to learn. And so what we are going to do is we're going to adjust the network inside those formations. We're going to give them, adjust the UAS, the small UAS that they have inside of those formations. We're going to add EW capability inside of those formations. We're looking at adding robotics. We got next generation squad weapon that's coming on board, and we'll look at doing those. But what we're actually wanting those units to do is say, hey, what kind of UAS is a good example, and EW, what capability do you need at echelon? And does the EW capability for a cavalry squadron is going to be different than the EW capability needed for an artillery battalion? And what is it going to be different? And so those are the things that we're going to work on. I was just down at JRTC, 2101 is going through. We just fielded them. We're going through the fixed portion of their C2. They're actually going back to JRTC in August. And so that's one of the units that we're selecting that we can actually start to adjust while we're there. And to me, this is about a sense of urgency in what we're doing to transform.
Yeah, that's a great idea. How about cyber? Has always been a challenge at the training centers. Have they made improvements in that as well?
I think we're making improvements, and I will tell you on both sides of it. So one of the big things, if you're a division or you're a sustainment brigade, or you're all these other units that you're used to fighting in a warfighter or a simulation, it's a lot different actually being on the ground and dealing with the elements, having to dig in, having to move all the time. So, that is some of the adjustments we're doing. I think cyber is very similar. What capabilities do you need at echelon? And I go back to where I was a J3 in Afghanistan. You need a couple of the right experts to reach back Where do you need those at echelon? We're doing a lot inside of our multi-domain task forces with cyber and space. Great partnership with SOF. AUSA was out at NTC as we're working that. So yeah, I think across all the warfighting functions.
Yeah, that's great.
To look at that adjustments.
Go ahead and questions from the audience. Get you involved. I don't want to steal all the thunder.
Chief, good morning. I'm Ryan McCormick. I'm one of your fellows at the Brookings Institution. First, sir, I want to say thanks to AUSA for also putting this together. These coffee series are great. It's a great opportunity, obviously, to ask a question to the Chief. Sir, one question about your transition priorities and initiatives, if you could just touch on two in particular. First one is, I know you're waiting for some feedback on rearm. I'd be interested to know what's the consensus right now? Is it fit for purpose? Is it achieving what it needs to from your perspective and the Army writ large? And then the second one, could you talk a little bit briefly on TAA 26 to 30 and the possibility of realigning some like forces across the Army to get some synergies and some efficiencies in some of our capabilities from an installation and training devices, et cetera?
Okay. So first on rearm, we need a model inside the Army. You basically have to have a model where you figure out how you're going to train, you're going to modernize, and then when units are ready for deployment. I think there are some assumptions that have changed as far as rearm more as supply based, and as General Brown mentioned up front, how the world has changed and what the Army is doing. We're very busy, so some of those assumptions have changed, and so we are looking at how we need to adjust the model. One of the adjustments that we're making was exactly what I was talking about with transforming in contact. So typically, everybody would say, "Hey, I have this window when I'm back in the States, and this is when I'm gonna transform." I know that we can actually do that in Europe. While we're over there, actually, we can test things in a new environment, in a different environment. What we're doing with small UAS, what we're doing with EW, we can, actually working with our allies and partners and doing all of that. So that's an adjustment that we're making based on the realities of the fact that the Army is very busy. We've added brigades over the last couple of years over in Europe. To the TAA question, and we've been over on the Hill and been briefing that, making adjustments to what we need to do with our force structure. And I will tell you, some of the transforming in contact are things that we need to do. I mean, this is a process that we have to continually go through. I was DAMO FM. I know there's at least one former FM guy that was in here.
They try not to admit it.
Is modeling and what we need to do to adjust. That's the other thing that we want to do with transforming in contact. So we actually have a couple of different sketches, and they've been working on this in the IBCT lane, the Infantry Brigade Combat Teams. How do we look for light BCTs or medium BCTs? What I know is that we need to become more strategically mobile. And, my example is that we have a light formation has too many vehicles, way too many vehicles, and which are targets on the battlefield. So there's things that we need to do to adjust. I think that how we do reconnaissance is going to adjust with what we have right now with unmanned systems that allow us to do that. So we're making those adjustments. On the larger TAA side, what we have looked at are doing things that we have pulled. We were basically built for purpose to deploy BCTs back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan. And so we have to adjust to the contemporary battlefield that we're doing and make adjustments, and that's what we're doing. And I'm in a never-ending fight, I will tell you, is to reduce headquarters for a lot of different reasons, and then we have to grow UAS, we have to grow counter UAS. I think we have to grow long-range fires. So there's all those things that I think that we are the realities. And integrated air and missile defense overall is something that is a big focus areas of ours that we're going to have to continue to work on. This one right here. Do you want me to?
get there first, and then we'll come to you, Joe.
Okay.
Sir Doug Morrison, Citizen Defense, thank you for your time and remarks this morning. Always good to get leaders' intent. And I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on some points that you've made concerning maintenance, getting soldiers out of just, my words, going to the motor pool, doing services because we're supposed to do services, those sorts of things in terms of how do we move to the next generation of predictive maintenance. Like my wife's car, I don't have to change the oil. It tells me when I'm supposed to change the oil, those sorts of things. Wonder if you could just talk on that. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, and so we also just stood up a log cross-functional team between AMC and AFC, and I think they're going to help us with that. So there's a whole bunch that is in the log area, and I'll look over here at Heidi Hoyle, our G4 up here, if I miss anything. But to the services, one of the things, and as a division commander, I know getting ready to deploy something, and I know that I wouldn't, if my car, I'd only driven it 30 miles, but somebody says, hey, it's due to have the oil changed and serviced after 3 months, I'm not going to take it in and spend $250, to get that done. So we did get everybody together. That was all the CW4s and 5s that said, hey, let's change our service interval. We're going to save money. And equally important to me is that we don't have soldiers that are doing, spending their time on that. I don't think they don't mind. They want to keep their vehicles maintained. But I think that was, an issue being in the motor pool, doing things like that. And I heard that from soldiers that were out there doing that. We would like to get predictive on what we have for maintenance. And I think that we can do that. I also want to figure out how we can do passively have inventories where, we look at, there's a lot of examples where you can understand what's inside your formation. And again, we need to be careful about what signals that we're sending off, but you would actually understand where you're at across, all of your classes of supply and understand what that is. We are working on 3D printing. And I think that that's an important part of reducing what we have for our log footprint. I'm a huge fan of hybridization just because of what it does to reduce our, fuel consumption. And having done that in Afghanistan and knowing that I had to have a brigade operation when I was up in Kunar just to get fuel someplace, I know that that's, critically important as well. Telemaintenance is something else that we're looking at. So I think that's a critically important area for us. We are testing those. Again, Charlie Flynn is doing that out in the Pacific. We're doing these same things because it's different when you start talking about at distance. That's what we're testing, all of these things to make sure that they are going to work everywhere in the world. I always tell everybody we're a global army and we have to be able to do this anywhere, everywhere at any time.
Good morning, General. This is a fun question for you. The 173rd is having our annual convention in Reno, in Nevada. Would you like to be invited? And would you come?
Reno sounds great. I'm sure I'd love to be invited.
I'll have somebody reach out to you, okay?
Okay.
And the second thing is, I'm a Vietnam veteran and, with the 173rd. And I'm wondering how you could tap into the wealth of experience of us veterans to assist you in what you're up to in life and in the Army.
Well, I always tell everybody, that everybody should tell their personal story about what the military has done for them. And I think if everybody did that, that would help. I enlisted right out of high school because I had a Korean War veteran that talked to me about what the Army did for him and why he was so pleased that he came in the military, and it kind of got his life on a very good trajectory. So back to the recruiting, I think if everybody's out there, we have all the veterans around the country that are talking about that would help. Talk to influencers, to coaches, teachers, not even just talk to the kids, but whatever we can do to help with recruiting would be the number one request that I would make.
Chief, thanks for being here. Joe Reeder. It's a perfect lead in. I wanted to ask you about recruiting.
Mhm.
It's always a challenge. It was a big challenge for us back in the late 90s. Do you feel good about the game plan we have, or is it still a giant worry on your worry plate?
I think that I feel good about the decisions we made and the changes we made. And I'll go a little deeper into one of them. We are, and some of this was actually from the Guard. And I think that the Guard had done they pick recruiters. They're very selective about who they choose, and then they leave them in one location. And the advantage of that is you get to know the school counselor, the superintendent, the people that are local. And so we are doing a little bit better job picking our recruiters, and we've got those coming through right now, and then training them up for what they're doing. And not everybody I've met, I think we're getting ready to recognize some of our recruiters later today. I would go out to a recruiting station, and I remember going to one recruiting station, I think it was in Houston, and the sergeant first class, she had already, we're just a couple of months in, and she was well over 25 people that she had enlisted. And then there was somebody else that had enlisted 2 or 1. And so not everybody has the aptitude for that. So I think we have to pick the right people, to do that. So as I mentioned up front, I won't be, that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on. So I don't know if I'm optimistic about where we're headed. I think we're, headed in the right direction, but it's something we're going to have to keep after. And I think we also have to take a look at retention. And that's the other thing that what we can't do is be so focused on this is not, we need to maintain who we have inside of our formation. We've done very well with that, but that's not something we can take our eye off of.
Hi, good morning, sir. Jen Judson with
Hi,
Defense
Jen.
News. Broadly, in terms of capability areas, what remnants of coin are you looking to retire at this point rather rapidly? I know you talked a little bit about the network and how cumbersome that is, how we need to change that. But in order to free up money to pursue some of the things that we're working on now, pivoting now, what are you looking at divesting rather rapidly? And then you also mentioned adjusting small UAS. Can you drill down a little bit more? What will change in the way we use UAS now? What are you looking for? Just what are some of those adjustments specifically?
Yeah, so Jen, I'll start with small UAS because I think everybody's seen this on the, out there right now with what's going on. And we were talking about lessons observed or lessons learned. And I think it's a reality of today's battlefield, not just, aerial, but I think on the ground, and we're working with robotics, the same thing. If you can put a robot in contact, and save lives to do that, breaching is a good is a good example of that, then we should be looking at ways to do it. To me, this is a lot about the cost curve and what we're doing with small UAS. And rather than having these, having a program is that we would generally have a funding line that says, hey, this is what we're gonna spend this amount of money on small UAS and have the ability to adapt. And we have, modular open architecture systems that can, adapt inside of our formation. I'm seeing that kind of innovation. We're actually 3D printing some of these that are out there. We updated the blue list, which was what we can make. I think what'll change is the sensors, and those will adjust. And I think almost every formation out there is going to have these kind of systems to detect, reconnaissance, to protect, and then attack. And we're going to have to figure out inside of our formation where those different systems are going to go. And they're going to look different, all the way up. But we're going to have to be much more rapid in our systems. I think they're going to have to, they can't be systems that take, there have to be systems that are going to be operated with 1 or 2 people, very simply. And I think that's what's happening right now that's on the battlefield. And we need to adjust, some of those from, what I have used over the last 10 or 15 years.
Hello, sir. Bob Schultz, KMW and Nexter Defense Systems. First, thank you very much for sharing your vision this morning and your leadership. My question focuses on artillery. The Futures Command is working on a tactical fire study that's currently under review. And so I'd be interested very much in your thoughts and vision on robotics and automation for brigade and division level artillery. Not, strategic level, but more of a 70 kilometers and under range. Thank you.
So we're getting ready. I'm getting ready to actually meet to have a discussion here. We have done a fire study just to kind of look at that. And I think obviously anybody who's been out here on the battlefield knows that we're going to have all weather, all purpose fires, that's going to be a part of what we have inside of our formation. So again, back to the robotics, I think we're going to look and see, how is it that we can deliver things that would be, put our soldiers in, less harm's way to do that. So I think that is definitely a possibility, something that, to take a look at. What I do know is that for our artillery, it's got anything that sits on the battlefield, just with the ubiquitous sensors that can't move quickly is not going to survive. And so that's the big thing that I think that we have to look at, that we've got to look at things that are very, that are mobile, can get shots off, rapidly and very accurate. The very accurate piece is key because you see what that does to your magazine depth. And, you want to, when you're firing something, know exactly where that's going and it's going to have effects. So I think that obviously robotics and all of that plays a part in that.
Good morning, sir. My name is Alton Osler with SAIC. First of all, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. My question is related to counter UAS and especially how we've been seeing day after day. It's been such a clear and present danger on the modern battlefield. So my first question is, from an appropriations perspective, do you believe the Army could benefit from more resources allocated and directed towards counter UAS, or do you believe current levels are sufficient? And the second part of my question is the Army's roadmap currently, as understood for counter UAS, is to deploy it on a divisional level. Is there a vision to push counter UAS down to, say, for example, a battalion or company level? Thank you.
Yeah. So, on counter UAS, my, first big answer is I think we have to do more. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what we're doing right now. So I mentioned transforming in contact. We are actually doing that we're doing that in CENTCOM right now. So the idea is that we would have users, developers, and testers that are all together. And, nothing hits that home. I was over in the Middle East and was standing on the roof of a building, whether it was up in Erbil or in Syria at a small, outpost that we have up there, and just understand how different those environments are and what we need to do to kind of increase our capability. And it's adjusting rapidly. And so what we want to do is be forward and actually have everybody on the ground and start adjusting that. The other thing that I think, and this gets back to what's a change that we've done over the last 20 years, I think it might have been to Jen's question, is I don't think we can afford to have FSRs on the modern battlefield. That's just my view. I don't think we need, it's one thing to have FOBs, where we had these big outposts and you had a whole bunch of folks that we need to, get away from those kinds of things. And so systems need to be simple, intuitive, so that we can operate them. And I'm really happy with what the 210 Mountain that's over there right now, Colonel Scott Wentz and his team, just spending time with them. They are the people that are over there in the middle of it. And those soldiers are so innovative. There's actually a major who was probably sorry that he spent a little time with me, because I was like, you might come to the Pentagon next. And he's like, no, I want to be the Brigade S3. So, but They are adjusting and learning over there, and that's what we need to do. So, and it's the same thing with UAS. I think we need to have broad funding lines and not get tied into one specific program, because things change so quickly that we need to have the flexibility. And if what's happening right now is that changes, and this gets back to EW and everything's going to have to be software defined. The environment's going to change anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. It's going to adjust, and so you can see that if we don't have the kind of flexibility that we need to adapt, that's not a POM cycle where you need to be able to adjust that. It has to happen, inside of that. And I think there's been a lot of people that have come out and said that. And then we need to we are having those discussions about what it is that we, how do we adjust inside of our formation to make sure that we're, doing everything that we possibly can.
Good morning, Chief, and thank you for being here this morning. John Morgan, IBM. And my question to you is, in your 120 days since your remarks at AUSA, can you give your general thoughts and the things that you've seen around the Army with how the Army's dealing with its data challenges, the impact of machine learning, artificial intelligence, generative AI, and how the Army looks to go ahead and deal with some of those emerging challenges in this environment? Thank you.
So we are actually, and I think some of the leaders out of the Army staff are going to actually attend this course. We have a data course that we're doing up at the Army War College this Friday and Saturday. I think we are building that in. Again, that's a lesson learned that we're going to have to build that in at echelon and understand. I think the other adjustment that we got to make is that everybody was used to, over the last 20 years, sitting in these great big jocks, and everybody wanted to see a video, and everybody wanted to see all this kind of information. Is that you have to understand what data do you really need at what level to make what decisions you need to make. And because then again, that gets to how big and complex our C2 nodes are. So I think that's all got to be part of the process that we're doing. And in the end, this is about, if we can move data, you can pick and choose, how you're moving that around and working with transport. And that's why, again, the network is, for us, is the number one priority because I think it is going to mesh all of everything together. So we certainly got a lot to learn. There's several examples. UAS is one where you got commercial industry that are out there, building UASs. Data is another one that I think that we can learn from commercial industry. The logistics that was brought up, there's a lot that's going on. So wherever we can, I think we need to really leverage the power of, American industry to help us figure some of this out.
Hi, Ashley Roki with Breaking Defense. I wanted to pull on a few of the threads that you've been talking about. Sort of what is your assessment at this point of the Army's portion of the pivot to the Pacific, especially when the rest of the world is just not letting that happen? And then sort of as you build, the budget's about to be released, and you look at the artillery strategy and some of the other, strategies and changes you've been looking at, what are some of the decision points, whether it's weapon systems, whatnot, that you've been having to grapple with, and preview of what we might be able to expect?
Okay, I'll start with the relatively easier one first. So I'm really pleased with what we're doing out in the Pacific. We have not actually adjusted anything that we're doing as far as our footprint that's out in the Pacific, what we're doing for the exercises. I've got the Indian chief who's getting ready to come out here for a visit. I think we're continuing with the exercises. What we are doing and adjusting, Ashley, is, and I mentioned the transforming in contact, is we're adjusting the complexity of what we're doing, that's out there in the Pacific. A good example of how we're training for that environment is the 101st just did a 500-kilometer air assault from Fort Campbell, down to JRTC. So we're also training our entire formation to understand that we have to operate at those kind of distances. And so I think that is helping us. But we've got the multi-domain task force that is out there and operating. We've got new systems that are coming online that we're putting out there, and we're basically using every exercise that we have. And General Brown and I were talking about this up front, that partners and allies, I think, are our asymmetric advantage, and we learn a lot from them. And we're going to operate with them. Is that we are actually, and we're doing this in EUCOM, and we're doing this out in the Pacific, and we take an exercise like Bala Katan and we bring in all the things that we're learning, and we adjust and we grow from that. And so I'm actually got the Australian chief and the UK chief that's getting ready to come here, and we're going to have some public events around what we're doing with AUKUS, Pillar 2, so that's coming up. But we are again, we're a global army, and we have to be focused, around the world. And that's why we're doing the transforming in contact, so that we can make adjustments with a sense of urgency.
Hey, sir, Allison Dieters, Northrop Grumman. A comment and a question.
Okay.
One, as a former appropriations staffer, when you talk about broad funding lines, and I see Jenny up here from SAS nodding her head, that gives us the weebies.
Sure.
We get some cringes going
Yeah.
on, and you can probably figure out why.
Yeah.
But I completely understand the need to pivot quickly. And so there's a tension there. So I might recommend that you, working with my friends up here in the budget shop, maybe have some conversations with staff on the Hill.
Yeah.
And help them understand why that's so important. So anyway,
I'll probably get counseled on whatever language I was using afterwards. But
No, I mean,
my point is not that
no.
we don't want the oversight.
That's fair.
What we're saying is, rather than saying, hey, it's this one, you're buying this one thing,
Yeah.
and you're going to have
For
it for
10
the next
years.
25
Yeah,
years.
it's just not gonna
We're
happen.
saying,
Yeah.
hey, this is what we're spending on UAS, and we have a mechanism, to
To flex where you need
to provide the oversight on what it is, but needing the flexibility. So I think that's changed. I know everybody's getting the
Yes.
whatever you said we're getting, that we're heebie-jeebies over it. But I do believe we're going to have to adjust in some way,
Right.
or if with things changing
Well, and
every
that's-
3 weeks or every 3 months, if you can't adjust.
That's true in the network. That's true in so many
Yeah.
different areas. And I think the appropriators are figuring that out. Like you said, it's finding the balance. So,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on the evolution of the integrated air and missile defense systems. Certainly as we're looking at the Pacific and the challenges, the deployment there. We're also seeing, Northrop Grumman builds IBCS. So we're seeing our ally Poland deploying that for the first time. And obviously they're in a very relevant environment, being bordering with Russia. So anyway, I would just welcome your thoughts on where you see that capability evolving, future requirements, what we could do differently. Just welcome any
Yeah.
thoughts you have there.
Well, I would
Thank you.
I think I'm actually really pleased with kind of where we're headed into that. And obviously would be the guy in the meeting that would always say, hey, we need to go a little bit faster. We need to, those kinds of things. But I think fundamentally, whatever we need that we're going to add, this gets to the open architecture, and that we can, that we're going to have a system that, can be brought into the architecture and everybody can understand and see what it is, that as long as we are doing that. And we're going to have to, that's something else that I think missiles are going to constantly evolve. And so our air defenses are going to have to constantly evolve. And, we've been, TAA was come up, had come up here earlier. I mean, we realize that is something that we need to grow, and we plan to grow as capability. And just having been over the Middle East, I'm really proud of what our air defense troopers, everywhere I go, and everybody, they are the most deployed formation that we have that's out there. And I always feel really great after I spend 5 minutes with any one of those formations. I mean, they're just motivated and happy to be doing the mission that they're doing. And So right now, I'm pleased where we're headed.
We got a lot of great questions, sir. We've got time for two more.
Okay.
Hi, General George. Dan Shear from Inside Defense. Just wanted to kind of follow up on some of the questions about UAS. In terms of the funding strategy, how are you all thinking about kind of shifting the funding over to procurement dollars? Because I know there's been a lot of emphasis on R&D, but given what's happening in Ukraine and in the Middle East, what's the timeline for kind of shifting the funding from R&D to procurement, and how might we see that for in the FY25 budget, and when's the Army sort of going to choose some more winners in terms of who's going to be doing this?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've talked about, Dan, is that how we choose. And again, I think we're going to buy a lot more of this. We're going to need it inside of our formation. Is that we are going to buy. I think we buy sets. I mean, if you're talking about getting something for the whole Army and doing that instantly, by the time you build something and get it all the way out, that's a ways down. So I think that there's room for this across a lot of different folks. I think we're talking the same issue with moving money across. From once you decide you have something, this is kind of what I was getting a more broad with the ability to move money around. Hey, this system really works, and we know it's really effective. We need to produce this number of it. We got this brigade that's getting ready, that's going to deploy. We've been training with it, and let's scale that up. If you had the flexibility to move, go over and say, okay, this is working, this is what we need to do, that we would buy more of them. So again, I think that's the kind of flexibility that that I think today's environment is going to require.
Hi, sir. Thank you for doing this. Meredith Roten Janes. I wanted to ask about your comment on having way too many vehicles out there and becoming more strategically mobile. Obviously, that's a long-term strategy, but can you talk about how in the short term we might see that manifest, perhaps in the fiscal year 2025 budget request, or more broadly
Sure.
in the short term?
Well, some of it was what we've done with just getting rid of some of the excess that we've had. So that's been some of it. And the example I love to use, this was not vehicles, but we've reduced vehicles that were excess. Of course, people still have to take care of it, but is a company commander that told me, he had 20 generators and one generator mechanic. And, you're hauling all of that stuff around that's on the battlefield. And part of this is how we exercise with everything and understanding what we really need for vehicles. So I look at two things on, as complexity of our formations. Obviously, there's a maintenance aspect that goes to that. So that's part of what we're going to look at as far as transforming in contact. What do we need to be mobile? I gave the network example. I don't think we should be dragging around big satellite dishes. That's vehicles and everything else. And I think the technology is moved past that. So there's a lot of examples like that. I don't think we should be running around in big expando vans, that are hard to set up and that are hard to move, that we've been using. So it's things like that I think that we have to look at inside of our formations. And we're getting that kind of bottom-up review from inside the formation.
Chief, closing comments?
No, I just, one of the things, and last Friday we did we had the dignified transfer for for their 3 troopers that, Sergeant Will Rivers, Sergeant Brianna Moffitt, and Sergeant Kennedy Sanders. And, stuff like that always reminds me, and there's a lot of folks I'm looking around the room who've been deployed. What I tell leaders is that everybody has a job to do at every level to make sure that, that whatever is happening at the forward edge, that we're doing everything possible. And, meeting with those families, it's an amazing story with each of their families, and a lot of them had served previously, but it just, and one of the things I talk with the staff reminds us of why we can't forget that regardless of how far you get, from the front lines, that's our mission, and we need to keep that at the forefront. So I appreciate everybody being here this morning. I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. And and I did talk to General Brown. He said that the breakfast was only about 200 calories. So thanks,
One
everybody.
piece of bacon, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Chief. We really appreciate it. Great questions too, everybody. Some upcoming events tomorrow, 7th February. We have the first ever hot topic on contested logistics, the newest cross-functional team. It'll be a great day, some great panels. So we're looking forward to that. On 13th February, next Tuesday, we have a virtual noon report. A guy you might have heard of, former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. So you'll want to tune into that. It'll be a great discussion. I might be able to get a word or two in, I think, if, in that hour. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Then 21 February is another coffee series with Sergeant Major of the Army, Michael Weimer. That'll be great. We'll see you at that. Finally, we're really looking forward to Global Force, 26 to 28 March down in Huntsville. Going to be a great venue, tremendous panels, and looking forward to seeing you there. So again, thanks, Chief. Really appreciate taking the time and answering questions. Just a great group of questions. And thanks everybody for being here. Have a great Army Day. Cool.